We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. I do believe that we shall live in peace someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, dear
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milia Islam Majid, and I serve as the Executive Director of the South Coast Interfaith Council. I want to welcome you this afternoon to this very special program. You know, I've been part of this council and part of organizing this program, the Martin Luther King Intercultural Interfaith Celebration, for the last 12 years now. And I always share reflections on this day about Dr. King and his legacy and who he was and our responsibility to honor him. And as I'm sitting in front of you, I can't but think how all these statements and these sentiments that I have about him are so much more powerful this year. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s belief in a dream of love in a dream of justice and peace changed our country, and one would argue our world. And as we gather together today, we must never forget them. We must not and cannot forget his unwavering beliefs, and we must use them, especially at this time in history, as a catalyst for every single one of us to ensure that we continue to strive with all our might to keep this a nation that is defined by love, that is defined by compassion, that is defined by justice, and a nation that's defined by unity. Today, we will not only remember Dr. King and his phenomenal legacy, but also we will learn how we can honor him by working to achieve economic, educational, criminal, healthcare, environmental, and racial justice in our breakout sessions, which will be led by experts in these areas. In addition, we're so thrilled to have with us our LA County Supervisor, Holly Mitchell, our keynote speaker today. Supervisor Holly is an experienced leader who is fighting to address the social and economic challenges that impact the everyday lives of Los Angeles residents. For the past 9 years, she has represented Los Angeles in the state legislature, where she currently serves as the state senator for California's 30th Senate District. Supervisor Holly is one of the most effective representatives for Los Angeles, having worked to pass nearly 70 bills in the legislature to protect and advance California's values. Her work in Sacramento provided real solutions for the nearly 1 million Angelenos she serves and has been recognized by many, including the Los Angeles Times, who has called her the legislature's moral compass. She is a proud mother, a third-generation Angeleno, and she has amassed 3 decades of experience working with communities and leaders in Los Angeles to remove barriers so that all of its residents can thrive. She understands that we're facing a pivotal time in our nation's history that calls for Los Angeles, for LA, and for all of us to lead by example and to stand up for our moral compass. So without further ado, we have a fantastic program ahead of us with lots of sessions and a jam-packed 1.5 hours. So I'd like to please ask you to help welcome LA Supervisor Holly Mitchell and our President-elect Susan Brooks to address the keynote address. Thank you.
It's such a it's such a pleasure to be in this space with you all today. Melia stole some of my thunder with Holly's introduction, but I will share a couple of things. Our theme today is Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, is the actual title of the speech that Dr. Reverend King delivered at the 11th Annual Southern Christian Leadership Conference Convention in August of 1967. It speaks to King's thinking about restructuring the whole of American society. To that end, I'm thrilled to introduce our newest LA County Supervisor, Holly Mitchell, to share her thoughts on how we as people of faith and concerned citizens might help affect some of these changes as we begin this new year with the new presidential administration and as we hopefully move out of this pandemic and into rebuilding our society. And I will apologize in advance if I cough with my microphone on because COVID has hit our house. A little extra background that I'll add, Supervisor Mitchell led Crystal Stairs, the largest child and family development nonprofit in the state. And it was her passion for children and the harm she saw done by state budget cuts that led her to initially run for office, and is the way that I got to know her because my sister-in-law had the pleasure of working with her. She spent 9 years in the state legislature, and her election to the supervisors this year was never a given. Holly built a coalition of grassroots and progressive groups that enabled her to beat the more establishment candidate, much like we've seen across the country. And because of your reputation as a moral compass, I want to open this up to you with this quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. America, the richest and most powerful nation in the world, can well lead the way to this revolution of values. There is nothing except short-sightedness to prevent us from guaranteeing an annual minimal and livable wage, income for every American family. There is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war. There is nothing to keep us from remolding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood.
Susan, thank you so much for facilitating me being here with you today. I appreciate you. Please know that I'm sending you warm healing and positive energy and vibes and prayer because this virus is impacting us all in such a profound and deeply personal way. And so I hope that you're feeling better very, very soon. That was an amazing quote to read. To reread. I love that final line. Let me see if I can find it. Of course, I can't, even with my glasses on. The line about recalcitrant, I just thought it was so profound. You know, Dr. King had such a gift for words that here we are reading them and rereading them 50 and 60 years later. And the fact that they ring so true and relevant today, I think, is symbolic of the power of the word and the power of truth. You know, as I think about his work with the Poor People's Campaign that has now been reimagined with a whole interfaith coalition across this country, you know, it reminds me of those critical words about equity, about pay equity. And as a policymaker, we have unique opportunities to, you know, operationalize Dr. King's vision each and every day. I'm so proud of the work that former Mayor Michael Tubbs from Stockton, it's now been picked up by Mayor London Breed in San Francisco, Mayor Garcia in Long Beach, Mayor Brown in Compton. This whole notion of income equity and providing resources so people can take care of themselves. You know, this notion that poor people are poor because they choose to be or because they're lazy, we all know that that's wrong. And so how do we create equity in a capitalistic society to really give extra resources to allow those to really provide for their families and live with dignity? I think that was the whole focus of Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign. And what all of us should strive to do, not just the weekend that we acknowledge and celebrate the anniversary of his birth, but each and every day. And that's what I try to do as a policymaker.
Indeed, you do. So another quote that I wanted to pull out is that he said, the great majority of Americans are suspended between these opposing attitudes. They are uneasy with injustice, but unwilling yet to pay a significant price to eradicate it. He quoted the assistant director of the Office of Economic Opportunity at the time, who said, the poor can stop being poor if the rich are willing to become richer, even richer, at a slower rate. Furthermore, he predicted that unless a substantial sacrifice is made by the American people, the nation can expect further deterioration of the cities, increased antagonisms between races, and continued disorders in the streets. He asserted that people are not informed enough to give adequate support to anti-poverty programs, and he leveled a share of the blame at the government because it must do more to get people to understand the size of the problem. Now, certainly, as you referenced, this is what we're seeing today. What we've seen in 2020 really hasn't changed much. So my question is, how can elected officials and activists better articulate this message to bridge the division brought on by trigger words such as socialism?
And, you know, I think that we have to disempower those words, to be perfectly honest. If Susan, if you and I had been on the steps of our US Congress on January 6th, and we were going to attempt to take an unofficial poll and ask the people who showed up there to protest to define socialism, we would not have gotten one common definition. We wouldn't. And so if we just remove those labels and use basic core tenets like humanity, and tap into our multiple teachings of faith around caring for the least of these. And the whole notion of justice, I think it helps us get closer to where we want to be. You know, what I saw in the eyes and faces and the hatred I saw spewed all over literally our Capitol steps and the TV screen was hatred, I believe, grounded in fear. Fear of a sense of loss of power and control, fear of people that they don't know, fear that they will be treated perhaps as they have treated others throughout the course of history. And so I'd rather that instead of getting stuck in terminology that most people don't know the accurate definition of, that we use words that work for all of us, that are common language, that are commonly referenced, that we really talk about humanity and how we build a society in which all of our children are treated fairly, have equal opportunity for a future, and a true sense of equity. You know, this year I'm reading in honor of Dr. King's birthday, a wonderful collection of his speeches. And the title is pulled from one of his speeches, and this line, "In a single garment of destiny." And in reading this compilation, you know, I understood this year, perhaps more than in the past, that there really were maybe a common set of 5 themes that Dr. King lectured us all about and preached about consistently throughout his very short 39-year life. That always gets me every year. I think about the body of his work, the impact he had on the world in 39 years. But this notion of a single garment of destiny, I think is what we have to be reminded of when we talk about all the isms: racism, classism, sexism, xenophobia, all of them. And so recognizing that it's our ability to unite, come together, and live together and work together civilly is what's going to improve the world for all of us. Because he beautifully articulates this notion of a single garment. We all have one planet that we've got to survive in. And this notion of haves versus have-nots. Those who are living impoverished, those who are of excessive means, Black versus white. We have to begin to have a deeper, more meaningful conversation. And I think the role elected leaders like myself play, and activists play, and members of interfaith coalitions play, is having these conversations where we are. It's not exclusively the role of government to, quote, figure it out. It is the role of government to establish policies to protect people from all the isms. But it's all of our responsibilities to do what we can to create a collective societal change in terms of attitude and perceptions. You know, I think like Dr. King, I'm putting my eggs in the basket of the new emerging next generation of leaders who are witnessing history happen before their very eyes, who witnessed a horrific murder of a Black man on screen, who saw the world respond with peaceful protest, who saw others who chose to incite violence, but that the true driver around our desire for change was peaceful protest that we saw happen literally in every continent in the world. This is the same generation who witnessed an effort to derail democracy in action on January 6th at the US Capitol. And so this is the generation that I think will go much farther than ours in really articulating and living in a way that Dr. King envisioned. You know, Susan, I introduced a bill last year, my last full year in the California legislature, called the Crown Act. And CROWN is an acronym for Creating a Respectful and Open Workplace for Natural Hair. And basically, you know, I wear my hair in its natural state. I'm locked, and we found that there were public policies and school-based policies and work-based policies all over the country that prohibited Black people, quite frankly, from showing up to work or school with their natural hair. There were literal policies that said you couldn't wear your hair in its natural state in locks or twists or braids. And so this bill, people thought, well, it's just about hair and it's a choice. Just if your job doesn't want you to wear your hair locked, change your hair. That's not what it was about. It was about targeting one group of people saying that you couldn't wear your hair in its natural state because it was deemed inappropriate or unacceptable or less than. That's racism. And so that's one way as a policymaker, I was able to introduce a concept that is now taken off like wildfire, I may say. And it's created opportunity for us to have conversations about culture, about what it means to be a Black woman, what it means to be a Black mother of a young girl in school who was suspended because I chose to send her to school with her hair braided, and what that does to her and her self-esteem, and the message it sends to her classmates about the way her hair naturally grows. So I think that's just one example, one tiny example of many examples of where public policy can be changed to help create a culture shift. But there are also so many meaningful examples in the world of where societal change and culture shifts help inform policy changes. That was the era of Dr. King, where it was the interfaith coalitions organizing that forced policy change from the highest courts of the land and from federal government. I think that will have to continue, but it really works best, I think, when all of us in our various sectors are having meaningful conversations about racism, classism, sexism, and what we as individuals study in our very own homes can do to create a society in which we're all valued and respected.
Absolutely. And I know as a parent of Black children, you know, how much that has affected our family as well. Mm-hmm. And how my daughters look, or if my sons have chosen dreadlocks at certain times or things, it's very important. And we've seen that those laws have expanded to New York, and hopefully with a new Senate coming in federally.
I hope so. It's now in 7 states. A bill was introduced in the House of Representatives, but like you said, hopefully with the new composition of our U.S. Senate, they'll entertain the Crown Act in the U.S. Senate as well, and it'll be law across the country.
And once again, California has led the way, and we thank you.
Yes, we did.
We've seen a lot of tension and blaming this last year or so, from the demonstrations for racial justice to the recent insurrection in D.C. In his speech, Dr. King remarked, "It is important for the liberal to see the oppressed person who agitates for his rights is not the center of tension. How strange it would be to condemn a physician who, through persistent work and ingenuity of his medical skills, discovered cancer in a patient. Would anyone be so ignorant as to say he caused the cancer? Through the skills and discipline of direct action, we reveal that there is a dangerous cancer of hatred and racism in our society. We did not cause the cancer, we merely exposed it. Only through this kind of exposure will the cancer be cured." So my question, as I was thinking about this, is when we see such division and positioning throughout society, and mind you, I started writing this question before Wednesday, what do you think needs to happen from both the governmental and grassroots perspective to cure this cancer?
You know, I think not only what happened Wednesday, but, you know, I think COVID has been an interesting revealer. It has been an interesting revealer of the cancer that has lived in so many communities for so many years, Susan. When I look at my own supervisorial district 2 and 1, the 2 that have been most profoundly impacted by the spread of COVID, you know, we look at the composition and what communities are disproportionately impacted. It's communities that were already suffering before COVID, suffering socioeconomically, suffering from housing instability, from food insecurity, from limited access to preventive healthcare services. And so COVID has named cancer, if you will, in terms of acknowledging inequities in our system as a whole. I think it's also an issue of, you know, implicit and explicit bias. And the cancer, you know, cancer can start small, and if gone unchecked, spread. And it's those microaggressions that I, as a Black woman, have experienced regularly, that I have experienced actually in the very blue state of California, state capital. And if gone unchecked, they spread like a cancer. So all of us have a responsibility to openly talk about our own bias. I was very proud a couple of years ago. I asked the pro tem if she would encourage every member of the Senate Democratic Caucus to take the implicit bias test. They're available online. Harvard has a series of tests. You can do it in the privacy of your own home. Because I think what's important is for us all to check ourselves first and foremost. You know, my antenna quiver immediately when I've had colleagues tell me, well, Holly, there's not a racist bone in my body. Well, from my perspective, that's denial. We all have our biases. We all have lived experiences, lenses through which we view the world. So the first step is to understand that, be aware of that, be honest to yourself about your bias, and then begin to educate yourself, check yourself, reform yourself. I think that's so important. You know, other ways in which I think government can begin to collaborate and address these issues is evident in the example of an action I had the pleasure of taking with Supervisor Solis just this past week or two around a motion where we're really going to work meaningfully as government with our brothers and sisters in the faith community who've been doing this work from the very beginning to figure out ways in which we can collaborate, local government and the faith community, to support the needs of our communities in a meaningful way. That will very likely manifest in direct service, but I think it also could potentially manifest in these kinds of conversations very regularly, Susan, about what it means to address the cancer known as racism, the cancer known as classism, the cancers known as sexism in our communities. And so, again, the reason I chose to run for elected office, you know, I love my work at Crystal Stairs. I think I did meaningful good work there. But the reason I chose to leave that life and thrust myself in the very public life of elected office is because I wanted to continue that work at a different platform and continue to talk about ways in which government can use its power, its bully pulpit, if you will, to talk about these critical societal issues that are impacting us all in a deep and profound way. And when I say all, I mean all, not just Black people or brown people or poor people or women, but everyone, because as Dr. King said, in a single garment of destiny. When I do better, Susan, you do better. When your children do better, Susan, my children do better. And so that's the reason I have chosen to work in and around government most of my professional career, and why I chose to run for office and most recently local office, to bring that passion, that perspective, that commitment to the front each and every day.
And that you do. And I love that not only have you done that, but you've mentored other younger women along the way, and men for that matter, who have sought out government position or elected positions, who continue to do that. And one of the things that we didn't have time to get to, but one of the quotes that I'm going to share is that from King, often white liberals are unaware of their latent prejudices. And that what you said is we need to start with ourselves. And one of the things that I am so proud of with South Coast Interfaith Council is we have these kind of programs that we've been doing online all year, so that we've had much more access than in the past. And our president, Sardine, and I, as a Muslim and a Jew, both did the New Ground program, which is a partnership between Muslims and Jews to learn about each other. And one of the most valuable things out of that is the value of storytelling. And when you know somebody, it's very hard to hate them. And when you know their story, you get to know them. But I'm going to close with this final quote. And we thank you so much for being here today. You really added to our program, and we're so grateful. But I'm going to close with this final quote, which is just as pertinent today as it was in the 60s. In the days ahead, we must not consider it unpatriotic to raise certain basic questions about our national character. And I think that that is a role that we all play, as we all have a right in that. And the next thing we're going to move on to is a short video. We asked faith leaders and youth of different faith groups to describe to us in a minute or less a reflection on what they think King's calling is today in 2021.
Thanks for inviting me, Susan.
Reflecting on the dream and the message of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in a post-2020 America, asked us to stop and to truly reflect on his words, what he truly meant by love. Oftentimes in America in the last half century, we've tried to make MLK's words fit into our moderate version of America. But when MLK talked about love, he talked about an economy that lifted up everyone, not just a few. A criminal justice system that was fair and equitable to everyone, not just a few. So as we reflect on his words, we have to reflect on how we have misinterpreted them and the economy and the country that he truly envisioned.
Hello, relatives. Freedom of religion is our right. Levels of spirituality is our choice. Respect, righteousness, and reciprocity, that's our responsibility. We're living in a pivotal time right now. Things that were once widely accepted will no longer be tolerated. We must forget those forced teachings and go back to honor. For that to occur, we must lead with love and compassion. We must embrace all that is good and cultivate fairness and balance. We're in this together. Let us stand and be one united force.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. I'm Imam Abdul Hafiz from Masjid al-Sharif in Long Beach, California. And what Dr. King would like to see in a post-pandemic world, from my perspective, is little boys and girls, Buddhist and Catholic, Hindu and Sikh, Muslim and Jewish, in a circle, holding hands, collectively together, being the best that they could be as role models for a better future for us here in America and for the world. He was a man of peace. He was a man that tried to unite. And this is, I think, our continued goal, is to unite all of us as men and women of the world collectively, and of all faiths and those without faith, to be one united community, caring about each other, doing good towards each other. Peace.
In the post-pandemic world, we hope to discuss the importance of campus interfaith activities to bring together the student body's diversity of beliefs and faith traditions. We have found that by learning about religions and sharing our knowledge of different faiths, people become more aware, knowledgeable, and open-minded. We believe it is essential to bring people together to discuss belief systems like the Interfaith Youth Council's annual statewide Faith Forum.
Breaking down barriers between people, we can bring people together to understand one another. Dialogue removes fear. By promoting peace, acceptance, and tolerance, faith can heal society and renew people's spirits. Thus, by reaching out, wisdom can be gained and understanding can be broadened, so people can bridge differences.
I think in a post-COVID world, that Dr. King would have liked to see more dialogue between people, and how it's kind of a little bit different from a lot of the conversations we're having now is that it would force people to, number one, engage with people who don't really look like them when they're having, a lot of these conversations, these hard conversations, and agree to respect each other on a fundamental human basis when having that conversation. And then I think that, the power of the individuals, of organizing, of grassroots efforts for change, I think he would want to see that continue to come to life. We've seen it a lot recently, but I think he would be proud and happy to see that legacy continuing on.
Hey everyone, my name is Rishabh, and I'm a believer of the Jain faith. I believe that Martin Luther King in a post-pandemic world would be a strong advocate for justice coupled with compassion. Compassion is a core tenet of the Jain faith, and I believe that it goes well with justice, and Martin Luther King would be a strong advocate for this because understanding where someone else has gone, what someone else has gone through, especially in times like these, is very, important and critical to be able to create a dialogue and establish, an understanding of what needs to be done and what needs to be fixed. And I think that's something that we reckoned with over the last few months, given, the Black Lives Matter movement, economic inequities, and, people living paycheck to paycheck, and we having to witness suffering in this country. So I believe at the end of the day, having compassion for others and using that as a tool to achieve justice is going to be very important just moving forward in this country.
In a post-pandemic world, I think that Martin Luther King would want to see people supporting and taking care of each other.
Hello, my name is Rihanna Roy. I'm 15 years old and I'm from the Hindu community. I believe that in a post-pandemic world, Martin Luther King would like to see easier access to health essentials such as masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. These things are necessary during a pandemic, but unfortunately, they were not always available or easy to access. Communities that were especially affected by this were the low-income communities, which to this day are still affected by racial injustice. This is something Martin Luther King would like to see a change in, so that our entire country will still be equal and still have access to these things so that we can strive to create a healthy country and fight the pandemic together.
As a Muslim, words are not enough to describe Dr. Martin Luther King. Mr. King wrote authentic words of wisdom and inspiration from his heart. He embedded in himself the character of nonviolence with action. He was a living proof to the whole world how an individual, despite many challenges in his time, and around the time he was born, where millions of people died in world wars and conflicts in almost every part of the world, made peaceful coexistence and harmony his mission. He was the master of reconciliation without giving up hope, despite what befell to his race and his people in the past 3 centuries. I'm looking forward to a day where new Dr. Kings emerge and lead us from not understanding each other to respecting one another with love. Thank you.
What would Dr. King like to see in a post-pandemic world? Whatever that picture, I pray that it's better than what we're experiencing in a mid-pandemic world. I thought that all of the challenges we experienced collectively as a human race in 2020 would have brought us to a place of greater faith. It would have deepened our resolve to live for what matters and caused us to cleave to one another. But now we find ourselves in this nation more polarized than ever before. This chasm of hostility that has been induced is real and present. And I believe Dr. King would invite us to see the collective struggle as an opportunity to identify with one another, to give deference to one another, and to establish or attempt to establish true unity, because we're all members of God's family.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Dean, and I'm so grateful to serve as the president of the South Coast Interfaith Council just for, I think, a couple more months before I pass the imaginary Zoom gavel to Susan Brooks. So I'm here to introduce the next portion of our program. This is the working group portion. So if you thought you weren't going to have to work and think hard today, you were mistaken. So I think this program today was really built around the idea that honoring Dr. King's dream is not just a one-day commitment. It's a year-round work that we commit ourselves to. We are taught as young people to hang on to a lot of Dr. King's words, but what those words really represent, we don't spend as much time on. And one of the phrases I remember hearing the most as a kid was, the phrase from his I Have a Dream speech. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. However, if our neighborhoods are still economically segregated, will the boys and girls have the opportunity to join hands? If Black children aren't healthy enough to play, will they have the opportunity to join hands? If the air isn't clean in their neighborhoods, will they have opportunity to join hands? If they're not receiving the same educational opportunities, how will they end up in the same classrooms and workspaces in order to hold hands? So we really would like to move beyond the hashtags and one-liners to understand what was and still is beneath Dr. King's words. We must focus on removing the barriers between all of our children of all colors. So to help us understand the systems which keep our communities divided, we have invited, I think there are 6 facilitators. I'm actually just overwhelmed because I'm so excited to introduce you guys to them all. So we have 6 facilitators who are really just giants in our community doing the work day in and day out. And we are so grateful to have them here to lead the conversation regarding economic justice and systemic racism. We have Pastor Stephen Q from CLU, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. After a coalition ambitiously and successfully organized to pass a living wage law in LA in 1996, a conversation began between clergy, social justice advocates, and union members with the view to create a faith-based nonprofit to organize the faith community to speak out for workers' justice claims. This vision, under the leadership of Reverend Alexia Salvatierra, birthed CLU. CLU continues to facilitate coalition building and collaboration in LA County and Orange County to create a just and sacred society. Pastor Q is a former Virgin Records hip-hop artist who became the pastor at Skid Row's Church Without a Walls several years ago. He joined CLU's Black Jewish Justice Alliance in 2014 after hearing about it from a program at USC Center for Religion and Civic Culture. In addition to his pastoral duties, Pastor Q is a faith-rooted organizer for CLU. So I'd love to welcome Pastor Q. Can I ask one of my co-hosts if they can highlight the person? People don't need to see my face. I would love to spotlight the person that we're introducing. To facilitate a conversation on environment, we have with us Communities for Better Environment, Sylvia Arredondo. Communities for Better Environment was launched in 1978 after the first Earth Day kicked off a decade of environmental activism. CBE focuses its work where conventional policies of profits before people do the most harm, in poor communities and neighborhoods where people of color are the majority. That's where you'll find concentrations of pollution sources, oil refineries, power plants, chrome plating facilities, and more, causing disproportionate levels of poor health and fueling climate change. Sylvia Arredondo brings deep community connection to her role at CBE, as she was raised and currently resides in Wilmington. She has served as CBE's development associate for 3 years. She was a fundraiser for Peace Action West and serves on the Wilmington Neighborhood Council. Sylvia currently serves as their civic engagement coordinator. Facilitating a conversation on education justice, we have with us Megan Kerr. Megan Kerr is a lifetime Long Beach resident, a current vice president of the Long Beach Unified School District Board of Education, where she is in her 7th year representing the greater North Long Beach community. She helped champion Educare of Los Angeles and Long Beach, a partnership between the Long Beach Unified School District and various nonprofits committed to utilizing a framework in which all children receive high quality care and education from the moment they're born to the day they enter kindergarten. She's a strong advocate for our LGBTQ youth and students experiencing homelessness, working with staff and community partners to support their unique needs. She also serves on the board for the California Conference of Equality and Justice and Rancho Los Cerritos Historic Site. She began her 2nd term on the board in 2018 and continues to advocate for and support students and families throughout the school district. We have, to facilitate a conversation regarding the criminal justice system and systemic racism, Bend the Ark's Emily Caesar. Bend the Ark is a movement of tens of thousands of progressive Jews all across the country to build a more just society. The movement uses a three-pronged approach: stand with communities under attack, hold elected officials accountable, and win local progressive victories. Emily Caesar is a graduate of the Bend the Arc Jewish Actions Jeremiah Fellowship and has been a volunteer organizer with Bend the Arc Southern California's Criminal Justice Committee since 2014. She has organized at the local and state level, including passage of the LA City's Fair Chance Ordinance, Los Angeles County Measures R and J, State Propositions 47 and 57, as well as reforms to California's laws regarding juvenile solitary confinement and police use of deadly force. When not volunteering with Bend the Arc, Emily works to advance health and health equity as a senior manager of planning and collaboration for LA County's Department of Public Health. Welcome, Emily. To facilitate a conversation around health inequities caused by systemic racism, we have with us Dana Sherrod of Cherished Futures for Black Moms and Babies. Data shows that Black mothers and their babies disproportionately experience higher rates of adverse birth outcomes compared to other groups. In LA County, the rate of pregnancy-related deaths is 4 times higher for Black women when compared to white women. The rate of babies born prematurely is also 50% higher among Black women than for white or Asian women. Last year, in partnership with HealthNet, the Hospital Association of Southern California, and the Public Health Alliance of Southern California, they launched Cherished Futures for Black Moms and Babies, an initiative dedicated to close the birth equity gap, reduce infant mortality, and improve maternal patient experiences and the safety of Black mothers. Dana Sherrod is the Perinatal Equity Manager with the Public Health Alliance of Southern California and the project lead for Cherished Futures for Black Moms and Babies. Thank you, Dana, for being here with us. And to facilitate a conversation around systemic racism and anti-racism work, we have Social Ventures Partners Los Angeles's Christine Margiotta. Christine is passionate about channeling our collective power to create enduring justice and community. As executive director of SVP Los Angeles, she brings together nonprofit, community, and foundation leaders to fuel systemic transformation, facilitating mutual learning, deep connection, and synergistic collaboration. Christine launched SVP's Systems Change Accelerator to bolster early stage social justice initiatives and anti-racism for white people, a year-long learning journey for 170 plus community leaders. For nearly 20 years, Christine has leveraged a blend of community organizing, grant making, and policy change to create progress on racial and economic justice, homelessness, and LGBTQ rights. Prior to SVP, Christine was a vice president of community impact at United Way of Greater LA, where she designed and led Home for Good, the region's initiative to end homelessness. Welcome, Christine, and thank you for being here. And finally, but not least, one of the rooms we're most excited about is our youth breakout room. And I actually had to speak to some younger folks. I was like, what should we call it? I was told to call them young adults. So we're gonna say this is a breakout room, which really is calling out to our young adults, and there's no numbers or age. If you think you belong there, you're welcome. Hosting and facilitating a conversation for our young adults, we have with us Eve Levinson. Eve currently serves as a policy advisor for March for Our Lives. She's a political science major at George Washington University, who's also working on her master's in public administration. Eve is also a longtime volunteer for Jewish World Watch, has interned for the Jewish Center for Justice and for Senator Dianne Feinstein. So welcome and thank you so much to all of our facilitators. I know you guys all have incredibly busy schedules and you are serving us day in and day out. Thank you so much for being here and enriching us with your presence and facilitation. So in a moment, everyone who is here with us will have the opportunity to pick from one of the 6 rooms that you see in front of you, demonstrated by the individuals. I think everyone's picture is up right now. So I believe you will get to pick which room you would like to enter by clicking on the breakout room button on your screen towards the bottom.
Sarah,
yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't actually see Christine Margiotta on the call, so her breakout room may not be available.
Okay. Okay, so Christine is the room on anti-racism. Maybe she'll join us later. Okay, So keep that in mind as you pick your rooms.
And Christine, if you are on, if you could unmute yourself and pipe in, but I don't see.
Awesome. So in front of you, you have Pastor Q with economic justice, Sylvia with climate and environmental justice, Megan with education justice, Emily with criminal justice, Dana with healthcare, and Eve with our young adults program. You're going to be welcome to enter the room. You will have 20 minutes. We suggest you start with a facilitator introduction, participants introduction. When you come back after the 20 minutes, we will invite your facilitator to share a 2-minute summary of the magic that happened in your rooms. And with that, I think, Cheryl, are we ready to go into the rooms? I wish I had a wand. There you are. Hi, Bonnie. Thank you for being here. Which room did you go to?
Healthcare.
Okay. So there seems to be, I think some people are still in their rooms. Cheryl, are you back?
Are you guys coming back?
Yes, I'm back.
Cheryl, should we delete the rooms now, or do we just wait?
I can delete the rooms.
Well, the criminal justice people, she didn't get to do much. She wanted to share her email address with people so they could contact her. So I don't know that she actually finished everything up yet. So.
Oh, she's back. She's messaging her contact.
Yeah, I just saw the pop up. There's another opportunity to get back in. Is it going to restart the clock, or is it going to continue?
I think the breakout rooms will be closing in about.
Yeah, the breakout rooms will be closed, and we're going to do a little wrap up to give each room a little 2-minute.
Yeah.
2-minute.
It's never enough. It's never enough.
You'll be able to solve all the justice problems in the world in 10 minutes, right?
You're right. You're right.
Talk a little bit about how we're going to further the conversations.
We will get permission from the facilitators to share emails. And we will have a session. We haven't scheduled them all yet, but we're planning on having a session on each of these, a full session.
Yeah, I'm gonna, when I invite them all to share, we'll touch upon that again too. Oh, they're all coming back and they're putting their contact. Look at how amazing these individuals are. They are pros. So I can see the facilitators are entering their contact info into the chat so that everyone can follow up. I think, is everyone mostly here now?
And know that for those, I'm not always that chat savvy, so know that we will share this information with all the registered people as well.
Let me just
so that
do a spot check. Sherry, are you back? Pastor Q, are you back?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, so to me it looks like
here.
everyone's back. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna invite one facilitator at a time to give us kind of an overview. First of all, I'm hoping that in 20 minutes, you guys have now established justice on earth, right? 20 whole minutes. So we'll invite each facilitator. They'll have 2 minutes to kind of give us an overview. I know it wasn't enough time. I know you wanted to hang out in other rooms too. And so the last Sunday of every month, we will be continuing this program as our commitment to the dream of Dr. King. Every month, we will be bringing back one of the facilitators to host a standalone workshop in our usual 3 to 5 p.m. slot. So fear not if you were not able to visit a different room or you guys didn't get to talk enough. So I'm going to invite Pastor Q. Can you share with us your group's discussion?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be better for someone who was in the group to share, someone who was actually listening. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer to do that? I would like to see what folks got out of it. If not, I can share, but I'm wondering if there's someone. Anyone?
We're kind of like, some people didn't get to meet you, so this was a nice way for them to meet you as well.
Okay.
Pastor Q,
Yes.
this is Eve. I'll just try to do a little bit. You'll probably have to fill in for me. But basically, if I'm correct, we talked about the idea that King mentioned that racial justice and economic justice are twins, and that they cannot be separated. And we spoke about the fact that there are so many people in this country who are poor and starving and homeless. And so we talked about the fact of social democracy or democratic socialism, you know, where people might be given a monthly
Universal
allowance or a monthly
income.
stipend.
Yeah.
It was $1,000 was mentioned. As I recall, I think perhaps $2,000 was mentioned by AOC and Bernie Sanders at one point. But basically, like Social Security, you know, like having a monthly income, because so many jobs will be going to technology, and so people will be losing their, you know, their means of income, and just, you know, the idea that there's so much inequality in this country. You know, there are either the very rich or the very poor, and the middle class, you know, as has been so much for such a long time, is being shoved out. And also that the idea of democracy or a democratic socialistic society was brought up by Dr. King years ago, and that, you know, Bernie Sanders was not the person who actually introduced it, you know, to our country.
Thank you so much. You are awesome. You got it all. You got it all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. So there we are. That was our 2 minutes.
Do you want to say anything else about your work or Clue, or
Yeah.
how everyone else can be engaged with Clue?
Yeah, I was just basically telling folks we generally accompany unions in their work as they fight for justice for workers. We work with a lot of unions, SCIU 721. We work with Unite here. And we're actually the group of folks who actually got the $15 minimum wage as a minimum wage for hotel workers in downtown Los Angeles first, before anyone started talking about it nationally. It started right here in downtown Los Angeles. And so another thing, it seems like most of our work, most of the work begins in California. Most of the shift begins in California. Obviously, we have earthquakes, so we have the tectonic plates that continues to send shockwaves around the country where there's social justice. I'm also part of Black Lives Matter, and we know that now historians are saying it's the largest movement for social justice in the history, for racial justice in the history of the world and in America. So we know that that's just part of the work we're doing, and now we're doing some work with Clergy for Black Lives. And tomorrow we will be doing a Twitter storm tomorrow to lift up the radical king and fight back against this prophecy from false religion, false Christianity, that Donald Trump is supposed to be president, right? So that we do, so I'm moving and interwoven, because the stuff that poor people deal with it's not, you can't just silo it into one little box, right? We have to interwove it. They're all interactive. And like Dr. King said, racial justice, if you're going to deal with economic justice, you have to deal with racial justice. Malcolm X even said that as well, because the only reason why folks went to Africa to get Black folks to work the land was because of capitalism, right? So here we go.
Thank you so much, Pastor Q. We deeply appreciate the work and your leadership. And thank you for sharing with us and being here with us. And we look forward to continuing our relationship throughout the year. Thank you. Next, I'd love to invite Sylvia from Communities for Better Environment.
Hi again. So for us, 20 minutes went by so quick, but I was able to share with the group, and then we did a short, discussion or hearing from each other, but looking at the principles of environmental justice and how, some of the teachings of what we hear from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a quote on, especially a quote that also Supervisor Mitchell shared with us, right? Looking at that, oh my God, what was it again? I'm like just blinking now. Being tied into a single garment of destiny, and the interconnectedness of our natural environment, our relationships, each one and each other. And so highlighting and uplifting that these are also same values and core principles of environmental justice as well. So affirming the sacredness of Mother Earth, ecological unity, and the interdependence of all species, and the right to be free from ecological destruction, as well as an environmental justice principle. When Dr. King talks about, or we learned the study of his work and how he rallied and stood with sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, right? Labor wages. You also have Black folks working in some of the most hazardous conditions. And so these are some of the same core values and principles of environmental justice, affirming the right of workers not having to choose between a paycheck and their livelihoods. And so taking some of those core principles and carrying those forward, and talking about, when we look at environmental justice frontline communities, seeing that where we're living, where we're working, what is around us, whether it's the ports, the freeways, warehouses, truck traffic, the closer you are to those infrastructures, who is living right there on those fence lines. And hearing from, you know, some of the folks who are in the group, the closer you live, the kinetic circles, one way that we talk about it are cancer clusters, right? And these cancer clusters are centered in a lot of communities of color. We also heard from Patricia in the group. There's medical literature that is documenting the air quality impacts of health, air quality impacts on health on pregnant women who are living close to freeways, the different cardiovascular, lung diseases. And so why aren't we making more stronger policies if this medical literature is out there already? And we didn't get to too much of the other thumbs up activities, but I think I'll pause there.
Thank you, Sylvia. And is there an opportunity coming up to engage, or how can people continue? Did you put something in the chat already?
I did put our website where folks can sign up to email, but yeah, that should be fine.
Why don't we go ahead and invite Dana Sherrod next, since you brought up healthcare. Dana, can I welcome you back?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. And I want to just echo what Sylvia said. A lot of, 20 minutes, of course, like everyone said, went so fast. But we had some conversations about how we see, really the same communities being impacted, between COVID, asthma, so many of the different inequities are hitting the same communities. And one of the things that I was able to share with the group is that, what shapes our health is not just, access to healthcare, but it's also the communities and the context in which we live our lives. And, where most folks live is not necessarily by choice. Yes, it is, but it's also very much a matter of design. So we talked about how in Los Angeles County, we are still incredibly segregated by race and ethnicity, which is, a lot of why we see some of the same health, outcomes or poor health outcomes among the same communities of color who are still being impacted. We talked about how everybody deserves the right to healthcare, and how even in the midst of masks and mask wearing, how we see differences and differences even in understanding, public health and healthcare, and personal health. And we talked also a lot about in the midst of COVID, how we're seeing disparate needs, and disparate outcomes related to food insecurity, and who has access to food right now, and who has access to the resources that they need to live. And so this is so much of a deeper issue that is rooted in the historical context of segregation and racist policies that we just don't have time to get into, but is so critical to this discussion, as it sounds like folks were able to touch on in their groups as well. So I am about to, Sarah, I know you just shared it, I think before our program today, but I'm going to relink it in the chat box here for those who are interested. I would encourage you to watch, there's a free 1-hour documentary on KCET called Power and Health. And if you are interested in learning more about how our laws and policy and historical context influence the outcomes and health that we see today, it is a great documentary. I had the great privilege of also writing a companion article along with this documentary that also goes further into what we can do as individuals and what we do for, as those who are part of systems, how we start to create change. So I'm going to link those in the chat for folks who are interested.
Oops. I tried messaging the link, but it copy pasted the wrong thing. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Dana. We really appreciate you. And you've actually already booked our workshop date. So Dana will be rejoining the South Coast Interfaith Council on the last Sunday of June, which is the 27th, 3 to 5 p.m. So if this is a topic that you're interested in, we invite you to come back and join us. Megan Kerr, can I invite you next?
Yes, thank you. I have to apologize to my group. My dogs very rudely stormed in the room and yelled at the UPS driver in the middle, and it knocked me off my game. So I apologize to my group. But we talked about education as a system. Dana talked about systems, and the education system is certainly not one designed to meet the needs of all students. It was not designed initially to do that. And so recognizing the places in which our systems are inherently racist is critical to moving forward. So it was an amazing group of people who have a different connection to schools, either being past educators, grandchildren in the system, and a deep desire to be able to support the work that happens around justice in schools. And what I said is that schools are the place where all of those other pieces that we talked about today, healthcare, economics, policy, environment, that students bring a collection of all of the traumas and injustices that happen in those parts of their lives into one space. And that as schools, we're expected to meet all of those individual needs, which is not what we're funded for and is not actually what we're charged with. But that the right work to do is to build relationships with students and to address as many needs as we can. So everything from homeless students to, we have Long Beach, I will speak, has a very racially diverse district. Many of our schools are integrated schools, some are not, which are vestiges of the redlining that happened in Long Beach in the 50s and 60s. And so again, those economic policies that we're dealing with today. So being intentional in leadership and hiring leaders within school districts to be intentionally anti-racist in policy is critical. And so Long Beach Unified is fortunate to have such a leader right now in Dr. Baker, who has launched several equity initiatives in her first 6 months in addition to managing COVID, as the real focus to restore some of the harms that have been done by our policies and engaging community members network. CCJ, of which I'm on the board for, does a lot of our in the classroom work around restorative justice training. And Californians for Justice is a youth-led organization that has actually led 200 of our educators in an implicit bias workshop. So it was not led by adults, it was not led by their peers, it was led by our student leaders as one of the most impactful days of professional development that we've had. So listening and centering student voices, centering Black voices, and our students of color in the work that we do moving forward is critical. So I would love to come back along with either my superintendent or one of our equity leaders to talk more about the work and how folks can get involved.
Awesome, Megan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And any calls for action today or anything any future opportunity for engagement?
No, one of the things I said is that I think school board members are the most important elected officials around, with all respect to Supervisor, former Senator Mitchell, that who you have on your school board is critical to the work moving forward. They approve textbooks, they hire your leadership. And if you don't know who your school board member is, I implore you to find out if their value systems align with yours, or even if the whole board's value system aligns with the work you're trying to do around justice. And if it does, that's a great place to start, because our students are in the hands of that school system for 12, sometimes 15 years. And so understanding that very local leadership has a significant impact is a great place to start.
Awesome, thank you. I don't think our facilitator for criminal justice ended up, no, We did have Emily. Emily is here, right? Yes. Hi, Emily. The floor is yours. Tell us about criminal justice.
As with all the other groups, 20 minutes went by in a flash. But what was really compelling to listen to was the kind of depth of understanding that the criminal justice system has so many intervention points. We had folks talking about the school to prison pipeline. We had folks talking about policing. We had folks talking about sentencing. And I think as many issues inherent in that system, there are equally as many compelling ways to jump in and get involved depending on which element of the system is speaking most directly to you. And I think I want to put a plug in for doing this work rooted in kind of faith-based spaces. The quote that we were working with in our breakout group, for a law to be truly considered just, it cannot conflict with moral law. So when you can come into coalition spaces and stay grounded in your values and come at policy change from that perspective, it can be really powerful. And it's certainly been really powerful for me in my work with Bend the Arc and in the coalition spaces that I've been in. And I want folks to know that, you know, with a new DA in LA County, with a new supervisor in Holly Mitchell, the Board of Supervisors is more progressive than it has ever been. And the opportunities for change are endless, but it requires people bringing their talents, their energy, their enthusiasm, you know, you don't need to be an expert in these issues. You don't need to be like a super fancy consultant or activist. You just need to bring whatever talents you want to bring into the space. So I invite folks to look at the DA Accountability Coalition, join faith-based organizations, Clue, you know, LA Voice, Bend the Arc, certainly happy to talk to you about Bend the Arc if that's a space you want to be in. And there are these incredible coalitions, Justice LA, the DA Accountability Coalition. There are really so many organizations doing really impactful, important work right now. All you've got to do is show up, just show up.
Thank you so much, Emily. We really appreciate you being here, and you're leaving us with a hopeful note for reminding us that it is our moral imperative to hold our electeds accountable. We don't just leave them with the task. Now it falls on us to hold them accountable and to support them when they do good and call them out when they fall short. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. And were you able to drop your contact information, hopefully? Awesome. And now the 5 most important people that are with us here today are truly our young adults. So I would love to invite Eve Levinson to share the conversation that happened in that very sacred space.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So we had the smallest group and we had a nice large representation of what do young people mean. I myself am 21 and I was smack in the middle. We had somebody as young as 11 and somebody as old as 35 as a young mother with kids herself. So speaking to what you said about what does youth mean, that's always a great question in the youth organizing space. But we spoke quite a bit about what does MLK's legacy sort of mean to us in the work that we do. And I think that a great through line that I saw with everybody's answers was both sort of understanding what previous generations, both people who are still alive and people who are no longer with us, have done to make the privileges that each of us have, depending on what sort of groups we identify with, possible, but also understanding that there's still room for improvement and that we can both learn and improve upon that. And then we also spoke some about MLK's quote, the threat to injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and how young people take such an intersectional approach to the work that we do and really understand those intersections. So obviously we had other groups that were talking about issues of racial justice, environmental justice, all these different issues, but how really they're intertwined. And I would say, to leave on a note of hopefulness, that's something that I've seen within the youth advocacy space of people understanding those issues. And that gives me some hope that maybe we won't repeat the issues of the past that I know have existed when these movements have sometimes fought against each other rather than coinciding. I guess my call to action is I'll put the link in the chat for March for Our Lives' California chapter, and would encourage folks who are interested in getting involved to do that or to share. I know there aren't a ton of fellow Gen Z people on this call, but to share with those folks. And then also I would just say that we did speak a little bit in our group about how folks sometimes feel like they don't necessarily have the power to speak up as young people in those places. And I would just say that I was really lucky when I was as young as some of the youngest people in that groups to have incredible adults like Susan, like other people who gave me that space and who gave me the space to learn and grow. And if you do that and invest and then step aside, you will find young people who can lead that. So knowing that I'm speaking to an audience a little different than the breakout room, I would be remiss if I didn't say that.
Thank you so much, Eve. Thank you, Pastor Q, Sylvia, Megan, Emily, Dana, and Eve for facilitating these beautiful conversations. And I will now invite Melia back, our wonderful executive director, to help us close out the afternoon.
Oh, all right. I feel like I should administer a quiz now, right? What did we learn? Who did we learn it from? What are the contact informations? My goodness, it was so much. And we had trepidation insofar as how to fit everything in, but I'm so grateful that all of you are here and our facilitators and everyone else. Okay, let me start with some thank yous, because obviously, all this cannot be done. We are definitely a team that works together, and I thank you. I thank you for being here. I was jotting down some notes and I was saying, during this program, I couldn't but help look at these little screens, right? These little squares of people encapsulating these little squares. And there were so many people here. There's so many people here. And there are people from different faiths and cultures and races and sexual orientations and ages. And I couldn't help but to think to myself that, I think Dr. King would be proud. I think he would be proud if he saw this, because here we are and we make a conscious decision to gather here today to honor this phenomenal man, and not just honor him, but obviously also to commit ourselves, or to recommit ourselves to living up to his ideals, to creating a kind of community that he aspired to create in his such short life. And so I thank you for that. And one thing that I'm super excited about this year, which is different from the 11 years before, is this Zoom capacity allowed us to do these breakout sessions, because we really wanted to take it from theory and words to actually like practicality. And I'm so grateful for our facilitators who enabled that to happen. And like Sarah said, and everybody, there are so many messages on chat, and then also people are messaging me saying this is not enough time, and you are 100% correct. It isn't enough time. And that is precisely why, as some of our colleagues have stated, that we will have each of these sessions as a separate program. We're loosely calling it our Justice series right now, but we will have it all together with the dates, the times, the Zoom information, and we will be sure to send it out to all of you. We will also have it on our website. And if there's anyone who'd like to receive our newsletters, if you just send an email to office@scinterfaith.org, we'll be sure to get you on our email addresses as well. Just a few other people that I have to thank: the amazing choir, Pacific Unitarian Choir. I don't know if you weren't here in the beginning, I invite you to please take a look at this program again. It was on Facebook Live. We'll have it on our YouTube page. But what a beautiful song, and what an amazing choir. Thank you, Pastor Steve Wilson and the Pacific Unitarian Church's choir who put that piece together. The SCIC board, we're a team. I always say people get to see my face, but my goodness, the only reason is because I have this phenomenal team that works with me, and I'm so grateful for that. To all of our facilitators, thank you from the bottom of our heart. Sarah Dean, our president, who, you're right, you have about a month or so left in the presidency. Thank you for taking us through this Zoom adventure this whole last year, Susan Brooks. And lastly, but certainly not least, before we come to a conclusion, I want to give my heartfelt thank you to our office administrator, Cheryl Benz, who those who know the SCIC, there's a lot of back things going on simultaneously, and Cheryl every single time selflessly, and we're so grateful to you, Cheryl, for that. Thank you. We wanted to bring this afternoon with the clothes that kind of encapsulated everything that we covered. And we thought, how can we do that? And so we thought, you know what, we want to share music, right? Because music is something that also binds us together. And as we were examining, and Sarah, don't play it just yet, because I wanted to tell a little bit about this piece. As we were examining what we want to play, we chose this beautiful song by Rabbi Sandra Lawson called I Am Human. And what's really beautiful about Dr. King's message is that not only does it transcend time, right, but it transcends religion. It transcends our various faith traditions. And this was his relationship with people of other faiths was evident in his own life. We know the relationship and the friendship that he had with Rabbi Heschel, right? And he was a spiritual guide for Dr. King. And when I was looking at the song, and Susan is the one who introduced the song to us, we thought, what a beautiful way to close this program. It's a song by, like I said, it's called I Am Human by Sandra Lawson, Rabbi Sandra Lawson. And so we invite you to stay a few more minutes and listen to this song. And before we go to that song, just another heartfelt thank you so much for being here. And I truly, truly look forward to seeing all of you for our next year will be our 30th annual Dr. Martin Luther King program. And I hope that we can see each other in person. And I truly look forward to seeing you next year for that, and for all of you to join us in all of our other upcoming programs as well. So Sarah, Dean, I would love for you to play that as we bring this afternoon to a conclusion. Thank you so much.
Oh, say shalom, Berama. Oh, yes, shalom. Oh, say shalom, Berama. Oh, yes, shalom. May the one who makes peace from heaven above, we say, oh, yes, shalom. I am human and I am free. Watch me fly above the trees, 'cause you can hear my cry and you can hear my roar, but you can't take away my soul. Oh, say shalom, Berama. Oh, I say shalom. Oh, say shalom, Berama. Oh, I say shalom. May the one who makes peace from heaven above, we say, oh, I say shalom. Now listen carefully. We'll fight and we'll cry and we'll even abide and we'll say goodbye just to stay alive. And the day will come to have dignity again. Oh, say shalom, Berama. Oh, I say shalom. Oh, say shalom, I say shalom. May the one who makes peace from heaven above. I say shalom. I am human and I am free. Watch me fly above the trees. Oh, I say shalom.
Thank you again for joining us. Indeed, we're all human, and let us meet again next year, and if not before. Have a blessed night. Thank you all.